Welcome to Sweet Dreams Storytelling, where we unwind, relax, and drift into dreamland. I'm your host Mike, and I'm so glad you're joining me tonight. Let's get cozy and settle in. Story for this evening is our adaptation of a beautiful novel by L. Frank Baum, The Road to Oz. Chapter 1, The Stranger at the Gate. The Kansas wind was restless that morning, tugging gently at the golden stalks of wheat and rustling through the grass with a voice like distant laughter. The sun sat low in the sky, casting long, pale shadows over the Gale farm. Dorothy Gale, whose adventures had taken her far beyond the borders of any map, was sitting on the front step of Uncle Henry's modest house, with her chin resting in one hand and a small scuffed boot idly tapping the wood below her. She was bored. "Nothing ever happens in Kansas except the weather," she muttered, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. "And even that done sit always know what it wants." She missed Oz, though she wouldn't say it aloud, not in front of Aunt Em, who had only just begun to believe Dorothy wasn't entirely making things up. Aunt Em would simply say she was daydreaming again and hand her another chore. Toto, curled at her feet, gave a small sneeze, as if in agreement. Just then, a curious sound caught her ear. It wasn't the wind nor the far-off whistle of a train. It was the crunch of boots, or something like boots, on gravel. Dorothy stood and peered down the dusty road that curved past the farmhouse. Someone was coming. A boy about her age was trudging toward the gate, looking around with wide, puzzled eyes, as if he didn't quite know how he'd gotten there. His clothes were tidy but mismatched, and a battered straw hat sat crooked on his head. He carried no bag, no coat, and had the sort of calm, unbothered expression that didn't match his situation. Dorothy opened the gate and stepped onto the path. "Hello there," she called. "Where are you headed?" The boy looked at her, blinked once, then scratched his head. "I don't know," he said simply. "Well," said Dorothy, coming closer, "where set you come from?" The boy thought for a long moment, then shrugged. "Don't sit to know that either. You don't remember?" she asked, puzzled now. "Nope," said the boy. "All I know is I kept walking. This road goes somewhere, so I figured I follow it." Dorothy tilted her head. "What sip's your name then?" "Button Bright," he replied, with no more weight than if he'd said the weather was fair. "That sip's a funny name. People say that a lot." "Is it really your name?" "I think so," he said. "Leastwise it sip's what people called me." Dorothy frowned. "Well, you must have come from somewhere. Folks don't just appear out of nowhere." Button Bright looked down the road, then back at her. "Maybe they do. Maybe I did." This was getting stranger by the minute, and that was saying something for Dorothy Gale, who had met talking lions and flying monkeys. "Are you hungry?" she asked at last. "I don't think so." "Well, come on in anyway," she said. "Uncle Henry won't mind if we share some cornbread." As they turned toward the house, Toto bounded ahead, tail wagging at the promise of company. Button Bright looked around as if seeing the land for the first time, then paused suddenly. "Hey," he said, pointing back to the road. Dorothy turned. The road had changed. Where once there had been a single lane of packed dirt, there now branched 3 paths, each glowing faintly in the sunlight, one gold, one silver, and one with colors that shifted like oil on water. "That wasn't there before," Dorothy said slowly. Button Bright nodded. "See? Told you the road goes somewhere." Dorothy narrowed her eyes. "That looks like magic to me." Button Bright didn't reply. He was already stepping toward the colorful path, drawn by something silent and strange. Dorothy hesitated. Aunt Em would surely worry if she vanished again. Then again, Aunt Em didn't believe in magic roads, and Kansas didn't have roads like that. Toto barked once, trotted up to Button Bright, and sat down. "Well," Dorothy sighed, "I guess we sigh going." And so they did. Without maps, without goodbyes, and without knowing it, Dorothy Gale took her first step onto the road that would lead once more to wonder and into the heart of Oz itself. Chapter 2, The Shaggy Man and the Love Magnet. The magical road shimmered under their feet as Dorothy and Button Bright walked side by side, Toto trotting between them. The colors beneath them swirled and shifted, one moment a soft violet, the next a bold emerald green, then golden pink like a morning sky. Yet the path remained solid and smooth, as if laid by an invisible hand with a very fine sense of style. Dorothy was beginning to think it didn't matter where the road led, only who had made it. Ever seen a road like this? She asked, glancing at her young companion. Button-Bright shook his head. Nope, I mostly walk regular ones. That makes two of us, she said, though her voice was filled with the thrill of something familiar. Strange as it was, this road reminded her of the yellow brick one that had led her to Oz the first time. Feels like magic again. Button-Bright didn't answer. He was staring at something ahead. A figure had appeared, some ways down the path, a man with a head of wild reddish-brown hair and a beard that looked like it had been borrowed from a lion. He wore a coat, several sizes too big, patched at the elbows and shoulders with mismatched cloth. His trousers were rolled at the ankles, and his shoes, though sturdy, were well worn and dust-covered. But it was the look in his eyes that caught Dorothy's attention, kind, twinkling, and just a bit absent-minded, as if he were halfway between a thought and a dream. Now that's someone you don't see in Kansas, Dorothy whispered. As they approached, the man tipped his floppy hat and gave a lopsided grin. Good morning, he sang cheerfully. Lovely day for wandering, isn't it? I guess so, Dorothy replied, stopping a few feet away. Who are you? Who am I? The man echoed, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Well now, that depends. Some call me Shaggy Man on account of this. He gestured broadly at his beard and hair, and others call me simply Shaggy. Either way, it's Sip's friendly. Dorothy giggled. That Sip's a funny name. Better than a mean name, I always say. Button-Bright tilted his head. Where are you going? The Shaggy Man looked up at the sky and squinted, as if consulting the clouds. Oh, nowhere in particular. Just following this road wherever it wants to go. Roads have good instincts, if you trust him. That's what we set doing too, said Dorothy. That's ma Dorothy, and this is Button-Bright and Toto. Pleased to meet all three of you, said Shaggy, bowing low enough to make his coat sleeves flap. Say any of you folks interested in love? Dorothy blinked. Love? Absolutely, he said, rummaging through a deep pocket and pulling out what looked like a bright red heart-shaped brooch. This here is my love magnet. Makes everyone who sees me feel kindly and friendly. Very useful when you travel. Button-Bright eyed the magnet skeptically. Does it really work? Shaggy smiled. Of course. Would you two be smiling at me otherwise? Dorothy raised an eyebrow. I think we set just polite. Same thing in the end, Shaggy said, tucking the magnet back into his coat. Dorothy considered him for a moment. There was something unusual about the man. He had that peculiar gentleness found only in people who'd traveled very far and seen very strange things. And he didn't seem dangerous. In fact, she was sure he'd be more help than harm. You can come along with us if you want, she offered. The Shaggy Man beamed, delighted. Wandering Seps, more enjoyable with company. And so, the three children and the Shaggy Man walked together, laughter and conversation flowing more easily with every mile. They spoke of places they'd never been, foods they'd never tasted, and names that sounded like music. The road beneath them pulsed gently, humming like a lullaby as it carried them forward. After a while, Dorothy asked, Do you think this road is taking us to Oz? Shaggy raised his eyebrows. The Emerald City, could be. I've been hoping to see it again someday. Ozma Sip's a dear friend of mine. You know Ozma, Dorothy said with surprise. Of course, said Shaggy. She's Sip's the best ruler of Fairyland ever had, wiser than a library and kinder than spring. Dorothy smiled. It gave her hope, somehow, hope that this strange road, with its turning colors and mysterious branches, really was leading her back to the land she loved, the land where her friends were waiting, the land where no matter how strange things became, everything always made sense in the end. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the road ahead twisted slightly, curving into a grove of trees where the leaves glimmered gold and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon. Shall we? Asked Shaggy. Dorothy nodded. Let's see where it goes. And they walked on, deeper into enchantment, deeper into adventure, following the road that knew far more than it ever told. Chapter 3: The Road with 7 Colors. The grove they entered was unlike anything Dorothy had ever seen, even in Oz. The trees were tall and slender, their trunks ivory white and smooth as polished stone. Their leaves glowed in every imaginable hue: red, violet, jade green, cerulean blue, swaying gently though there was no wind. Tiny motes of golden light drifted through the air like lazy fireflies, and the ground beneath their feet sparkled faintly as if dusted with sugar. "This looks like the inside of a dream," Button-Bright murmured. "Or a painting," Dorothy added, reaching out to touch the bark of a tree. It was cool and hummed faintly beneath her palm. Toto barked twice and scurried forward, chasing one of the drifting lights. The road curved ahead, narrowing slightly as it wound between the trees. But when they reached the next bend, all four travelers came to a halt. Before them, the path split. Not once, not twice, but 7 times. Each path shimmered with a different color. They arched like rainbow ribbons over a shallow rise, curving in soft waves across the forest floor and disappearing into the distance. There was a red road, deep and gleaming like a ruby. A blue one, calm and cool like river water. A green path, mossy and gentle. A yellow one, bright as sunflowers. An orange, pulsing warm like firelight. A purple road, mysterious and shadowed. And a final silver-white path, glowing faintly, almost like moonlight. "Well now," said the Shaggy Man, placing his hands on his hips. "I've seen many a fork in the road, but never one with this many tines." 7 roads, Dorothy said softly. "That 7's not by accident." "No," said Shaggy. "It's the kind of thing only happens when magic is doing the steering." Button-Bright wandered a few steps forward and stood before the red road, tilting his head. "Do they all go to different places?" "Maybe," said Dorothy. "Or maybe they all end up in the same place, just not the same way." That's how choices usually work," Shaggy muttered, "even in regular life." Dorothy turned to him. "Do you think one leads to Oz?" Shaggy tapped his chin. "If I had to bet a biscuit, I'd say yes, but which one?" Toto sniffed each path carefully, tail twitching. He sneezed at the orange one, whined at the purple, then barked cheerfully at the silver-white road, running ahead a few steps as if to say, "This one." Dorothy watched him. "I trust Toto. He's been right more often than not." Shaggy gave a thoughtful nod. "Animals often have better sense than people, and that little fellow Sip's got eyes that see more than just color." "Then we'll take the silver road," Dorothy said. But Button-Bright didn't argue. He was already hopping from foot to foot, eager to move again. "Let's go." They stepped onto the silver path, and the moment they did, the other roads shimmered, then slowly dissolved into mist. Within seconds, only the silver road remained behind them, stretching both forward and back, as if it had always been the only one. "Well," Dorothy said under her breath, "guess that settles that." The road led them gently uphill, the trees parting overhead in soft, swaying arches. They passed waterfalls that sang in hollow tones, bushes that sparkled with dew shaped like diamonds, and meadows of tall grass that swayed even without wind. At one point, a line of golden butterflies flew in a perfect circle above their heads, twirling in the shape of a crown before drifting off. Button-Bright clapped his hands and spun around. "This place feels happy." "It does," Shaggy agreed. "But don't let your guard down too much. Even happy roads can have sharp corners." They walked for hours, though time seemed unimportant here. No one felt tired. Hunger came and went like a passing cloud. The sun hung above the trees in a golden haze that never changed position. At last, the road opened into a wide glade, where the trees stopped completely and the sky stretched above them like an endless blue canvas. Dorothy shaded her eyes. "Looks like we sit coming to a new country." Beyond the glade, faint outlines of towers and shapes moved in the distance, too far to make out clearly, but close enough to suggest civilization. "Whatever it is," Shaggy said, "it's waiting for us." The silver road narrowed again, pressing on toward the unseen land. They walked without hesitation now, carried by curiosity, comforted by each other's presence. Whatever lay ahead, good, bad, or strange, it was part of the path. And in the land of Oz, the path was often the beginning of everything. Chapter 4. The Fox King's Sep's Court. The silver road curved like a ribbon across a meadow and dipped down into a narrow valley carpeted with golden flowers. As the travelers followed it, Dorothy noticed the faint scent of something sharp and citrusy in the air, like oranges mixed with mint. It tickled her nose, and even Toto sneezed. "Smells like someone left the lid off a bottle of perfume," Shaggy said, wrinkling his nose. "Smells fancy," Button-Bright added, blinking. "Do you hear that?" They all paused. From ahead came a curious sound, not quite music, but not speech either. It was a series of sharp, clicking syllables, punctuated now and then by a trilling laugh or a low yowl. Then came a clear voice, unmistakably English, saying, "By all the tales in the realm, how dreadfully gauche." The four travelers pressed on, and the landscape changed quickly. The trees became tidy and symmetrical, as if someone had trimmed them with a ruler. The bushes were clipped into cubes, spheres, and spirals. Decorative fountains bubbled from the tops of polished rocks. Everything smelled faintly of cologne and order. Then they saw the gate, an arched structure made of silverwood, with tall hedges on either side. Above the arch, written in neat letters, was a sign. "Foxville, where wit wears a tail." Foxville, Dorothy read aloud. "I don't remember this place from Oz before." "New to me," said Shaggy, "but I heard rumors of it. A city of clever folk with fur and titles and very high opinions of themselves." As if on cue, a small bell jingled above the gate. A guard appeared on the other side, a tall, slender figure with red gold fur, wearing a fine green jacket, a monocle over one eye, and a tail swishing behind. He looked at them with clear suspicion and just a touch of boredom. "Visitors?" he asked, one ear twitching. "Without appointment?" Yes," Dorothy said politely. "We set just passing through." The fox frowned. "Passing through what, precisely?" "Your city," said Shaggy, tipping his hat. "Oh, I think not," said the fox, now holding up a velvet-covered clipboard. "We require all arrivals to be registered, scented, and confirmed by a member of the Proper Names Bureau." "We got names," Dorothy said. "I septum Dorothy Gale of Kansas. This is Button Bright Shaggy Man and my dog Toto." The fox gave a theatrical shudder. Informal introductions, so provincial. Then he sighed. "Still, you seem harmless enough. Follow me, but do not touch anything ornamental. That includes statues, fruit, or citizens." He opened the gate with a flourish and led them into the city. Foxville was elaborate. It was clearly a city built by people who cared a great deal about style and not as much about sense. Every building was shaped like a spire or an arch or a swirl. The streets were covered in soft carpeting, and the lampposts wore bow ties. Literally, and everywhere were foxes. Some tall, some short, all upright and dressed in the height of fashion. Velvet jackets, silk cravats, boots polished so bright you could see your reflection in them, and all of them wore monocles. Some paused to whisper behind lace fans as the group passed. Others looked scandalized by Toto's lack of footwear. "Never seen such a clean place," Button Bright whispered, "or such tidy animals." "They stare, not just animals," Dorothy said. "They stare, people, sort of." "I feel underdressed," said Shaggy, brushing dust off his coat. They were led into a wide courtyard with golden columns and a red carpet. At the far end, sitting on a high throne that looked like an oversized jewelry box, was a fox with the biggest crown Dorothy had ever seen. His fur was snow white, and he wore a cape made entirely of peacock feathers. Presenting his cleverness, King Dox XVIII, most vulpine and venerable, the guard declared. King Dox waved a paw in a lazy circle. Yes, spare me the fanfare. Come forward, visitors. Explain yourselves with minimal clumsiness." Dorothy stepped forward and curtsied as best she could. "Your Majesty, we sit on our way to the Emerald City. We didn't mean to disturb anyone. We just passing through." "Emerald City," King Dox leaned forward. "Do you bring gifts, fashionable ones?" I don't think so," Dorothy said, "unless you count friendship." "Friendship," Dox repeated, distastefully. "The invisible accessory. How quaint." One of his attendants, a fox in a lace jabot, leaned down to whisper in the king's ear. King Dox's whiskers twitched. "I am informed," the king announced, "that the Shaggy Man carries a love magnet." Shaggy nodded. "That I do. And may I ask why you did not offer it to me upon arrival? Surely the king deserves to be loved most of all." Shaggy raised an eyebrow. "Love works best when it sits earned." "How unfashionably noble," the king scoffed. "Nevertheless, trespass is trespass." He clapped his paws, and a group of guards stepped forward. Dorothy tensed. "We done want trouble, your Majesty." "Good," said Dox. "Then you won that's mind a short trial for your crimes." Trial, Button Bright exclaimed. We just walked in. In Foxville, all guests are judged. Stylishly, said the king. It is our way. Dorothy exchanged glances with Shaggy and Button Bright. They had entered Foxville by accident, but now it looked like they might not be allowed to leave. The red carpet under their feet suddenly didn't feel so welcoming anymore. Chapter 5. Escaping the Foxes. The courtroom, if it could be called that, was a domed hall of mirrors and chandeliers, with velvet walls and a faint scent of lavender. It looked more like a perfume showroom than a place of judgment, but the mood was deadly serious, at least to the Foxes. Dorothy, Button Bright, Shaggy Man, and Toto stood on a red cushion in the center of the room, surrounded by rows of elegantly dressed foxes, whispering behind fans and monocles. King Dox perched on a high-backed throne carved in the shape of his own tail. The court will now hear the charges. A fox in a powdered wig and gold-trimmed spectacles stepped forward with a scroll. He cleared his throat with theatrical drama. Charge the first, entering the kingdom of Foxville without proper tail paper. Charge the second, wearing uncoordinated footwear. Charge the third, possession of a magical object without a permit, specifically the love magnet. Shaggy Man rolled his eyes. This is starting to sound less like law and more like fashion criticism. Silence in the courtroom, cried King Dox. This is a very serious matter. You could have upset our delicate social ecosystem. Dorothy stepped forward.
Your Majesty.
We truly didn't mean to break any rules. We just followed the road. We didn't know Foxville was here. Ignorance is no excuse for informal accessories, sniffed a fox in the audience. Toto growled softly. He clearly did not care for Foxville. Button Bright looked genuinely puzzled. What's a tail paper? Proof that your tail has been properly styled and scented, said the scroll reader, which none of you possess, though the dog might qualify if groomed. Shaggy Man sighed. If we broken your rules, maybe we should just leave and save you all the scandal. King Dox leaned back, tail curling smugly. Oh no, it sits far too late for that. The law is very clear. The punishment for fashion trespass is... He paused dramatically, waiting for the hush to deepen. A week of mandatory etiquette education and wardrobe reform. Dorothy sits, mouth fell open. You mean you going to make us stay here and take manners lessons? With tests, added the scroll fox gleefully, and tailoring. Shaggy Man looked genuinely alarmed. Not tailoring. I like my clothes, Button Bright protested. And I like my dog in fur, not frills, Dorothy added hotly. King Dox clicked his claws together. Guards, escort the defendants to the refinement wing. Several tall foxes in feathered helmets stepped forward with satin leashes and posture rods. That was when Toto snapped. With a bark sharper than a whip crack, he launched forward, nipping at the nearest fox's foot. The startled guard yelped and leapt backward, colliding into a marble column and knocking his helmet askew. In the confusion, Dorothy grabbed Button Bright's hand. Run. Shaggy was already ahead of her, bounding over a low railing and knocking over a coat rack that landed with a crash. Toto zigzagged under legs, barking furiously. The three children and the Shaggy Man darted through an arched hallway, ducking past stunned courtiers. Silk curtains were torn down, hats went flying, and at least one monocle shattered on the floor. Behind them came the shouts of the royal guard. Stop them! Mind the cravat cabinet! Someone catch the dog! They dashed through a side door, down a spiral staircase, and into what appeared to be a room entirely made of mirrors. The reflections confused everyone, especially the foxes chasing them. There they are. No, there. I see 7 of them. Dorothy grabbed Shaggy Sep's sleeve. Over there, an exit. They burst through a mirrored panel that turned out to be a disguised doorway and tumbled into a garden of shaped hedges. The silver road sparkled on the other side. We sat almost out, Shaggy panted. But as they reached the gate, a squad of fox guards leapt out from behind a rosebush. Halt, in the name of decorum. Toto ran straight at them. The foxes panicked, not because of danger, but because they were terrified of dirt. One slipped on a patch of mud, shrieking, "My jacket!" Seizing the moment, Dorothy shouted, "Shaggy, the magnet!" Without hesitation, Shaggy Man pulled the love magnet from his coat. It shimmered like a beating heart in his palm. The moment the foxes saw it, they froze. Then their expressions softened. One blushed. Another clutched his chest. "Oh," sighed one of the guards. "I feel rather fond of them all of a sudden." "Such bold fashion choices," murmured another. King Dox stumbled out of the palace, panting. "What is happening? Arrest them." But when he saw the love magnet, he gasped and took off his crown, clutching it reverently. "Why? I feel as though I misjudged you." Shaggy Man gave a polite nod. "Happens to the best of us." Dorothy smiled sweetly. "May we go now, Your Majesty?" King Dox bowed. "Of course. How rude of me. Please accept my apologies, and this commemorative cravat set." He handed her a box of pastel bow ties. Dorothy accepted it with a polite smile. A moment later, they were back on the Silver Road, the gates of Foxville swinging shut behind them. The sun was shining, the air was fresh, and not a monocle was in sight. "Well," Button Bright said, brushing a bit of fur off his sleeve, "that was exhausting." Dorothy giggled, and weird. Shaggy tucked the love magnet away. "Foxes may be clever, but I prefer kindness to cleverness." Toto barked once in agreement, and the four of them continued on, leaving the world of powdered wigs and scented tails behind, heading toward new adventures and stranger lands still to come. Chapter 6. The Country of Donkeys. The Silver Road wound on into the hills, the morning sun casting long shadows across the landscape. After their escape from Foxville, the travelers were glad for quiet and open skies. Toto trotted happily beside Dorothy, and even Button Bright seemed brighter, humming a little tune as they walked. "That was a close call," Dorothy said, adjusting the ribbon in her hair. "I don't think I ever want to see another powdered wig in my life." "Or a talking cravat," added Shaggy. "Still gives me shivers." They'd been walking a good while when the scenery began to change. The trees grew shorter and squatter, their leaves larger and droopier. Strange vines dangled from low-hanging branches like lazy ropes. In the distance, braying sounds echoed faintly through the hills. It wasn't a joyful sound, it was sharp, nasal, and distinctly annoyed. "Donkeys," Shaggy Man said thoughtfully. "Sounds like a lot of them." Dorothy peered ahead. "Are they wild?" Button Bright squinted. "I don't think so. Look." The path leveled out and opened into a broad, flat plain of dusty grey soil. Dotting the land were buildings made of stone and wood, sturdy, square, and utterly plain. A wooden arch stood at the entrance, with a hand-painted sign, "Dunk it on. Wisdom through humility." "I don't like the sound of that," Button Bright muttered. Two donkeys stood at the arch, upright on their hind legs, wearing robes and holding long wooden staffs. Their heads were unmistakably donkey-like, with shaggy ears and long faces, but they spoke in perfect English. "Halt, strangers," called one. "State your business in the realm of the dignified and the wise." Dorothy stepped forward with a polite smile. "We such travelers, sir, just passing through, on our way to the Emerald City." The donkey nodded slowly. "Then pass you may, but only with respect and reverence. Here in Dunkerton, all are equal in intellect and judgment." "That sits nice," said Dorothy, sincerely. "Very nice," echoed Shaggy Man, though a little less sincerely. Button Bright, however, snorted. "They sure don't sound smart. They talk like they set reading from a rulebook." The two donkey guards stiffened. "Was that sarcasm, young creature?" the taller one asked coldly. Button Bright shrugged. "No, I just don't see why you talk all funny if you sir's supposed to be wise." Gasps echoed from nearby windows. A passing donkey dropped a basket of apples in shock. The second guard turned to the first. Unregistered insult. Violation of tone ordinance. Immediate citation required. "Wait, what?" Dorothy blinked. "He didn't mean..." But before she could finish, two more guards appeared, this time with a long scroll of laws and a feathered quill. "Named?" I asked Button Bright. He stared. Button Bright. The lead guard Sip's eyes narrowed. "That does not sound like a wise name." "He doesn't remember his real name," Dorothy interjected. "It's not his fault." Shaggy Man stepped forward. "Now look here, if your laws punish kids for not speaking like stuffed shirts, maybe you ought to re-examine your definition of wisdom." Mockery of governance. One guard called contempt of culture. Repeat violator. Escalate to correctional measures. Button Bright suddenly gasped and reached for his face. "Hey, what's wrong with my nose?" His ears stretched upward, his mouth and jaw elongated. A short bray escaped his lips before he could stop it. Dorothy backed away in shock. Button-Bright, you sir, turning into a donkey. It sips the curse of Dunkiton, the guard declared. Those who insult our ways are gifted with our likeness until they have learned humility. That sip's not a gift, Button-Bright yelled, or tried to. It came out more like hee-haw. Dorothy grabbed his hand and stared at the guards, her voice trembling. This isn't set fair. In Dunkiton, said the lead guard sternly, fairness is defined by those who practice it best. That would be us. Shaggy groaned. I knew I should sip, brought a whistle. Toto snarled at the donkey guards, but they ignored him. Take the offender to the reflection stables, ordered the taller one. Oh no you done tut, shouted Dorothy, spinning around. Come on, run. They dashed back toward the archway, Button-Bright stumbling on his longer legs, braying in distress. The guards gave chase, hooves clattering against the hard-packed road. Don't let them reach the path, someone bellowed from a tower. Shaggy Man reached into his coat. Dorothy, grab Button-Bright and duck. She did, pulling the braying boy low. Shaggy pulled out the love magnet and flung it high into the air. A shimmer pulsed outward like a gentle breeze. The guards stopped in their tracks, blinking rapidly. Why, I feel as though I've misjudged them, murmured one. Such graceful ears, said another. Shaggy caught the magnet again and turned. Let's sits move, fast. They fled over the arch and back onto the silver road. Button-Bright, his head still mostly donkey, clopped behind them on awkward feet. The further they moved from Dunkiton, the clearer the air became, lighter, looser. Finally, as they reached the bend in the path, Button-Bright tripped and tumbled forward. When he stood, his face was back to normal. He patted his cheeks, blinked, and gave a hesitant smile. Hey, I sip me again. Dorothy hugged him. You scared me half to pieces. Could sip been worse, Shaggy said, pocketing the magnet. At least they didn't try to give you a diploma. Tuto barked once and wagged his tail. Button-Bright looked back over his shoulder. Those donkeys weren't sit very wise. They were proud, Dorothy said. Sometimes that sip's worse than foolish. And with that, the road called them onward again, quiet beneath their feet, winding toward lands stranger still. Chapter 7. The Music of the Mist. The road grew quiet after Dunkiton. So quiet, in fact, that their footsteps seemed too loud. Even the birds stopped singing, and the wind, which had played cheerfully through trees and meadows earlier, now fell still as a held breath. Dorothy walked slowly, her eyes narrowing as she studied the horizon. Anyone else feel like the air just changed? It did, said Shaggy, adjusting his coat. Too still, like something says, watching or waiting. I feel heavy, Button-Bright mumbled, like my legs are full of sand. Toto growled once, then lowered his head, ears pressed back. The silver road ahead curved upward into a low rise and disappeared into a thick white fog. The mist shimmered faintly, silver like powdered snow, but it didn't move like fog should. Instead of drifting, it pulsed, like it was breathing. Dorothy stepped closer. Should we go through it? We have to, said Shaggy. There's no road around it. He reached out cautiously. The mist curled around his fingers like cold silk, neither wet nor warm. He looked back. Stay close together. If we get separated, call out. They walked forward and were instantly swallowed by it. Inside the mist, the world became muffled and strange. The light dimmed to a pearly glow. They could no longer see the ground beneath their feet, only feel the smooth, steady surface of the road. Even the trees were gone, replaced by pale shapes just out of reach. And then through the silence came music. Not loud, but unmistakable, delicate bells chiming in a slow, wordless tune. The sound floated above and below them, like it came from the mist itself. Dorothy stopped. Do you hear that? Shaggy nodded. Music like that usually means magic, or trouble, or both. Button-Bright's 6 eyes widened. It's 6, beautiful. The fog thickened. Their steps slowed. Then a new sound joined the bells, a soft singing voice. It was high and lilting, and though the words were in no language any of them knew, it filled the air like sunrise fills a valley. And from the heart of the mist, she came. Floating, not walking, just above the road, A girl danced toward them. Her skin shimmered like pearl, and her hair flowed like liquid sunlight. She wore a gown of rainbows, sheer and trailing behind her like a morning breeze. Every movement was music. Toto stopped barking. He whimpered instead and sat quietly, eyes wide. "Who?" Dorothy breathed. "Who is that?" The girl opened her eyes, iridescent like butterfly wings, and smiled. "I am Polychrome," she said, "daughter of the rainbow." Button Bright gasped. "You came out of the sky." "I fell," Polychrome said softly, "while dancing on the bow. I lost my step, and down I slipped. The rainbow rose without me." "You fell off a rainbow?" Dorothy asked. Polychrome nodded, still smiling, though a sadness lingered at the corners of her mouth. "It happens. Not often, but it does." Shaggy stepped forward and bowed. "You sturt welcome to travel with us, Miss Rainbow. We sturt on our way to the Emerald City." Her face lit up. "Ozma Sit's city." "You know her?" Dorothy asked, surprised. Polychrome twirled once, casting sparkles through the fog. "Oh, the rainbow touches many lands. We seen her garden from above." Dorothy extended her hand. "Then come with us. Maybe we can help you find your way home." Polychrome hesitated, then touched Dorothy Thea's hand. "Thank you. Until the rainbow returns for me, I will gladly walk your road." The mist began to lighten around them, whether from her presence or the music, none could say. The bells grew brighter, the fog thinner, and soon the silver road reappeared beneath their feet. Together they stepped out of the mist. Behind them, the fog hung in the air like a curtain, still glowing faintly with music, as if the land itself had been watching and had decided to let them pass. On the other side of the mist lay a rolling hill with soft green grass. The sun shone again. Birds chirped. Everything was alive and normal again. But the magic of that place clung to them like the scent of rain after a storm. Dorothy looked at Polychrome, walking just a few inches above the ground. "Do you miss the sky?" Polychrome tilted her head. "Sometimes. But the world below has its own wonders. As it never traveled this far on foot before." "Well," Shaggy said, "you set are in good company. We specialize in finding strange things." Polychrome smiled. "Then I think I shall enjoy this road." The travelers continued together, 5 now instead of 4, moving forward, step by shimmering step, into whatever mystery waited next. Chapter 8. Johnny Do It and the Magic Car. The next stretch of the road was calm, wide, and smooth, so much so that Dorothy began to worry. "Too easy," she muttered, hands in her pockets. "Usually when things get this quiet, something's waiting just around the bend." "Maybe it's a nice something," Button Bright said, skipping along the edge of the road. "Or a weird something," said Shaggy, which in Oz usually means the same thing. Polychrome twirled gracefully overhead, her gauzy dress catching the breeze. "I like this stillness. The earth is quiet when it sips holding its breath before wonder." Shaggy raised a shaggy brow. "That sip's poetic, also ominous." Toto sniffed the air and barked once, sharp and uncertain. Then the road abruptly ended. Or rather, it was interrupted by a deep, sudden chasm that stretched across the landscape like a crack in a teacup. It yawned at least 40 feet wide and dropped into darkness that shimmered faintly at the bottom. Dorothy approached the edge and looked down. "That sip's too deep to jump." "And too wide to climb," Shaggy added, tossing a pebble in. They waited. It never made a sound when it landed. Polychrome floated to the center of the chasm, then drifted back. There sip's no bridge, no trail around it. Button Bright pointed to the other side, where the silver road clearly picked up again, as neat and bright as ever. "So close. That sip's not fair." "Not fair," agreed a new voice, "is precisely why I invented something for just this kind of problem." Everyone turned. At the edge of the road stood a small man, hardly taller than Button Bright, with a leather apron, oil-streaked hands, and a massive wrench slung over his shoulder. His goggles were pushed up on his forehead, and a feather stuck out of his pocket for no apparent reason. A puff of smoke rose from the satchel at his side. "Johnny Do It," he said, tapping his chest with the wrench. "Builder, fixer, tinkerer of the mildly impossible." Dorothy blinked. "You just appeared out of nowhere." "I do that," said Johnny. "Time's expensive, and teleporting is faster than walking." He pulled out a notepad, flipped through several dog-eared pages, then squinted at the travelers. "Let's see. 4 travelers. one magic dog, and a collapsed access point across Rift 17. Yep, right on schedule. Schedule? Asked Shaggy. Cosmic one, Johnny replied, already unpacking tools. Things break when they're supposed to. I fix Septim when I Septim needed. He snapped his fingers, and out of nowhere came a toolbox the size of a house cat, which immediately sprouted wheels and a tiny smokestack. It puffed politely. Johnny Doit knelt beside it. Now if you still all stand back about 10 feet, and maybe cover your ears, this set'll take about 5 minutes. 6, if I overthink the steering mechanism. Dorothy and the others stepped back. Wait, steering? She asked. But Johnny was already working. Sparks flew from his fingers. Bits of metal, wire, and glass swirled through the air, assembling themselves mid-flight. Gears clicked into place. Wheels sprouted from nowhere. A long silver chassis formed and stretched, shaped like a canoe crossed with a sled, with golden handlebars and glittering cushions. The whole contraption hovered 3 inches above the ground. Voila! Johnny wiped his brow. A cross-chasm conveyance unit, or to put it simply, a magic car. The car made a soft purring sound. Polychrome clapped. It sits lovely. Shaggy squinted. Does it come with a guarantee? Only the finest, Johnny said. Runs on wonder, rides on hope, doesn't said need fuel, as long as you believe it. Said'll work. Wait, Dorothy said. We have to believe in it. Johnny shrugged.
Well, yes.
Magic sips like baking, it doesn't set rise if you don't sit trust it. Button Bright grinned. I believe. Tota barked. Well, I guess I believe too, Dorothy said, taking the front seat. They all climbed in. Polychrome floated just above it, and Johnny gave the back bumper a pat. Just follow the road, and Dunset tried to steer with logic. Dorothy turned. Are you coming with us? Johnny tipped his goggled hat. No need. Another breakdown, Sip's already calling me halfway across the muddle realms. And with a puff of smoke, he vanished. The moment Dorothy placed her hands on the golden handlebars, the car lifted slightly and glided forward. We, shouted Button Bright. They zipped out over the chasm like a silver dragonfly on a string of wind. Below them, the void shimmered with impossible colors, violet turning to gold, gold bleeding into black, and then sudden bursts of white like stars being born. Polychrome twirled beside them, giggling with delight. This feels like dancing through lightning. Even Shaggy laughed, clinging to the side. Now this is my kind of travel. Dorothy felt her heart pound with joy. It wasn't Kansas, it wasn't Oz, not exactly, but it was magic, and it was freedom. They reached the far side of the chasm just as gently as they'd launched, the car coming to a perfect floating stop above the road. Then with a cheery ding, it vanished. Did it just disappear? Button Bright said, blinking. Shaggy nodded. Mission accomplished. Johnny Doit always cleans up after himself. Dorothy stepped onto the silver road again. I liked him. I hope we see him again someday, said Polychrome. They looked back once across the now impassable void, and then forward to where the path dipped into a glowing forest filled with tall, shadowy trees and flickers of movement among the leaves. The road, it seemed, was not finished surprising them. Chapter 9. Through the Land of Scoodlers. The silver road led down into a valley draped in shadow. Even though the sky above remained bright and blue, the air was thick, like warm velvet, and it muffled their footsteps as they walked. On either side of the path grew tall, twisted trees with leaves shaped like jagged stars. Between the branches, Dorothy thought she saw strange eyes blinking, watching. I don't like this place, Button Bright whispered. Neither does Toto, said Dorothy, glancing down at the little dog. He had stopped growling and was now utterly silent, which was somehow worse. Polychrome floated slightly higher than usual, her rainbow gown dimmer than before. The air feels wrong, like its sip's been spoiled. The trees pressed closer. The road, usually bright and confident beneath their feet, now glimmered weakly as if uncertain. We should move quickly, Shaggy said, and stay together. They walked for what felt like an hour, maybe more. Time seemed to stretch strangely here, like taffy. Then the road narrowed and twisted between two looming stone ridges, forming a crooked pass. The walls were high and steep, blocking the light. Just as they entered, Dorothy heard a rustling, then a soft crunch. She stopped. What was that? Button Bright peered into the shadows. Something moved over there. A shape detached itself from the rock wall, then another, and another. Out from the crags shuffled a group of creatures unlike anything the travelers had seen before. They had round, jelly-like bodies with rubbery limbs and two heads, one where a head should be, and another where a tail might be. Both heads had wide mouths, bulging eyes, and enormous grins that stretched too far. The creatures moved with a peculiar bounce, like they had springs for legs, and they smelled faintly of pickled turnips. What are they? Dorothy asked, backing away. We stir scoodlers, one head cried. The marvelous scoodlers, echoed the tail head. The jolly, wobbly, jiggly scoodlers, who love to make soup out of strangers. Button Bright's 6 eyes widened. Soup? Toto barked furiously, but the scoodlers just giggled. We cert not joking, one said, licking its lips, both mouths. You see, visitors are so rare and tasty. You don't really eat people, do you? Dorothy asked, horrified. Oh yes, the scoodlers chorused. We boil sem, we stir fem, we slurp sem. We sit be delighted to have you for dinner, said one scoodler, literally. Polychrome raised her hands. We are travelers on a peaceful road. If you harm us, the magic of Oz will know. One of the scoodlers twirled a wooden spoon like a baton. Oz is far away. No one watches the middle lands. Farmers, why we simmer what we like. Shaggy Man stepped forward, holding the love magnet. But the scoodlers didn't set flinch. Love, bah, one sneered. We split ourselves from love long ago. Can sit love with 2 heads, they said, so we chose to laugh instead. Dorothy looked around. They were surrounded now, at least a dozen scoodlers, bouncing and grinning. We have to do something, she whispered. On my count, said Shaggy, drawing a length of strong rope from his coat. We distract, we move, we run. Got it, Dorothy said. He nodded. 3, 2, now. Dorothy threw her hands up. Wait, Dorset boil us. We sit not even ripe yet. Button Bright caught on. Yeah, you don't wid it, you done reap children. We taste like library books. The scoodlers paused. One tapped its chin with a ladle. Are they trying to trick us? Or are they just spoiled? While the creatures argued, Shaggy darted forward and tied the legs of the nearest scoodler in a blink. It fell like a sack of jelly, shrieking. Run, Shaggy shouted. Dorothy grabbed Button Bright's hand. Polychrome surged upward, swirling light into the scoodler's eyes as she flew overhead, dazzling and spinning like a prism storm. The travelers dashed back toward the mouth of the pass, but it was blocked. Back the other way, Dorothy cried. But the scoodlers were closing in there too. Suddenly, Shaggy pointed. That wall, look! A narrow crack in the rock, barely a crevice. No choice, he said. Dorothy squeezed through first, pulling Toto after her. Button Bright followed, then Shaggy. Polychrome shimmered and squeezed through in a burst of light, just as a scoodler lunged and bit the air behind her. Inside the rock crevice, they scrambled down a narrow slope, stumbling into a hollow tunnel of glowing blue stone. The sound of the scoodlers faded behind them. Only when they were deep in the tunnel did they stop to catch their breath. Polychrome hovered just above the ground, glowing faintly again. That was awful, Button Bright said, wiping his face. I'm going to have bad dreams about soup, Dorothy muttered. I told you, said Shaggy. When the road goes quiet, something's space waiting. Toto whined and curled against Dorothy Sepp's leg. Are we safe? She asked. For now, Shaggy said, and for once I don't stick care where this tunnel goes, so long as it sets not back to the scoodlers. The road resumed ahead, not silver now, but a vein of light carved into the stone, winding upward once more. The travelers followed it, bruised but unbroken, hearts racing, grateful for each other and for having escaped once again with their skins intact. Chapter 10. Lost and Found in the Fog. They emerged from the glowing tunnel just as twilight began to settle over the land. The air was cool again, cooler than before, and filled with a soft wind that carried the faint scent of lavender and damp stone. No more scoodlers, no more twisting cliffs, just silence. At first they were relieved. Then they realized they couldn't see the sky. The tunnel had let them out into a broad open plain, but low rolling fog crept over the grasses like a lazy tide. It wasn't the silver mist they'd passed through before. This fog was thick, dull grey and slightly blue at the edges, shifting like smoke but with the weight of rain clouds. The road beneath their feet had faded to a pale, uncertain trail, almost like chalk on old slate. Dorothy looked around. Where sips the sun? Polychrome hovered higher, gone or hidden. The fog is unnatural. Wonderful, muttered Shaggy. Just once I stepped like a stretch of road with no tricks, traps, or creepy weather. Should we wait? Button Bright asked. Let the fog lift. But already, it was swirling higher around their knees, and visibility was dropping fast. No, said Shaggy. If we stay here, we still lose the path completely. They pressed onward, staying close. At first, then the fog thickened. It crept into their ears and noses, muffled their voices, dulled their hearing. Even Toto's bark sounded like it came from behind a wall. Dorothy held out her hand. Button Bright, take my hand. I said I'm here, came a distant voice. But when she turned, he wasn't it. Shaggy, she called. Polychrome. No answer, only fog. The world shrank to a circle barely 5 feet across. Toto, she whispered. A soft bark answered. She knelt and scooped him into her arms. Okay, she said, heart pounding. We set been lost before. We set not going to panic. But her breath caught, because the road was gone. Dorothy stood very still, straining her eyes, but there was no sparkle of silver, no shimmer of magic stone beneath her feet, just damp earth and a thin trail of ghostly blue fog, pulsing slightly like a living thing. Toto whimpered in her arms. She took a step, then another, each one slow and careful. A voice called faintly through the mist. Dorothy. Her heart leapt. Button Bright. She turned and ran in the direction of the voice, only to find nothing. Empty fog, cold air. Then a whisper beside her ear. Dorothy, help me. Where are you? She shouted. But the voice echoed strangely, closer than it should be, and from the wrong direction. She froze. That wasn't set Button Bright Sip's voice. Okay, she whispered to Toto. This fog is doing something. It's Sitch trying to trick us. A wind stirred the mist. Shapes moved within it, figures just out of sight, always too far to touch. Some looked like people, some like trees. One, for a terrifying moment, looked like Aunt Em. But Dorothy held tight to Toto and shut her eyes. I sup, not afraid, she said. You hear me, fog. I sup been through worse. And then, she heard crying. Not a trick this time, real soft, familiar, Button Bright. She turned and saw him, crouched beside a bent tree, arms around his knees, fog curling around him like ropes. Dorothy ran. He looked up, tears streaking his face. I thought I was gone. I couldn't see anything. I heard your voice, but every time I ran to it, it was wrong. She hugged him tight. You sitch okay. You sitch okay. I found you. Toto barked softly, pressing his nose to Button Bright's leg. Dorothy stood and helped him up. We stay together now, no matter what. The fog seemed to flinch at that. It began to thin. In the distance, a faint glow appeared, a soft pulsing light like a beacon. Dorothy took Button Bright's hand and walked toward it, slowly but steadily. The light grew stronger, and as they stepped into it, the fog peeled away. There stood Shaggy Man and Polychrome at the edge of a small clearing. Shaggy looked worried. Polychrome was glowing faintly, her hands raised, light spilling from her fingers like rain. You steer back, Shaggy cried. Thank Oz. I saw the fog shifting, Polychrome said, lowering her hands. I thought maybe it had taken you. Dorothy exhaled, shoulders finally relaxing. It tried, but it couldn't set. Button Bright looked at the others, then at Dorothy. She found me. You stayed calm, Shaggy said. That sip's more than most would sip done in fog like that. I have seen whole armies scatter in it. Was it magic? Dorothy asked. Polychrome nodded. Old magic. Lonely magic. It feeds on confusion. But we sit together now, said Dorothy, and that means it can touch us. They stood in a circle, surrounded by the last tendrils of mist. Then Toto barked happily, tail wagging. The fog was gone, and the silver road reappeared, just beyond the clearing, shining once again. They stepped onto it, grateful for the clarity of each stone beneath their feet. Behind them, the plain of fog receded, curling back into the hills, as though ashamed of being seen. Dorothy looked down at Button Bright, still holding her hand. "You okay?" He nodded. "Now I am." The journey continued, each step a little stronger, each companion a little closer, bound now not just by direction or chance, but by choice. Whatever waited ahead, they would face it together. Chapter 11. Reunions and Revelations. The silver road felt warmer now. It glowed beneath the travelers' feet with new confidence, stretching out before them like a path that knew exactly where it was going. Dorothy walked at the front, holding Toto in one arm and Button Bright's hand in the other. Shaggy Man ambled beside them, humming to himself, while Polychrome floated above like a soft breeze, arms spread as if balancing on sunlight. They didn't speak for a while, not out of sadness, but reverence. After the fog, after the Scoodlers, after everything, they were simply glad to still be walking. Finally, Shaggy broke the silence. "Have you noticed," he said, "how the road only shows us one step at a time?" Dorothy looked down. The shimmer of the path seemed to brighten just ahead of her toes, but faded into dull stone behind them. "I guess it doesn't want us looking back," she said. "Or maybe it can sit," Button Bright said. "Maybe it only exists as long as we believe it should." Polychrome smiled, spoken like someone who sips learned from magic. He beamed. The hills around them began to roll gently upward, turning from grey into soft green. Trees returned, but they stood at respectful distances, like quiet watchers. Wildflowers dotted the roadside, purple and orange and white, each one swaying slightly as the travelers passed, as if in greeting. "Something feels different," Dorothy said, "like we said, getting closer." "To Oz?" Button Bright asked. "To something important," she said. And then just over the next rise, they saw it. A stone archway, ancient and moss-covered, stood across the road. Vines curled up its sides. Beneath it was a figure seated on a rock, legs crossed, smoking a long curved pipe. He was a man, but not ordinary. His eyes were sharp, deep blue, and glinting with 1,000 thoughts. His clothes were simple, a traveling cloak, old boots, and a satchel by his side. But everything about him radiated calm power. "Who sets?" Button Bright asked. "Someone waiting for us," Polychrome said softly. As they approached, the man smiled. "Well met, wanderers," he said, setting aside his pipe. "I was wondering how long it would take you." Dorothy blinked. "Do we know you?" "Not yet," he said, "but I sip known you." "You stir from Oz, unsit you?" Shaggy asked. In a manner of speaking, the man said, standing now. He dusted off his cloak and bowed slightly. "I sebum known in many corners, the whisperer in the west, the steward of paths, the tuner of time. But for your sake, just call me Taran." "Taran," Dorothy repeated. "Why were you waiting for us?" He gestured to the arch behind him. "Because what lies beyond that gate is the final stretch of your road, and it will test more than your feet." "What do you mean?" Button Bright asked. Taran Sip's smile was kind, but firm. "Every road that leads to Ozma must pass through 3 trials, one of memory, one of truth, and one of choice. You Sip passed the first 2. Dorothy tilted her head. "Memory. The fog," he said. "Truth. Dunkiton," Polychrome answered softly, where they called themselves wise. "Exactly," Taran nodded. "And now comes the final step. But take heart, many have walked this road, and few walk it alone." Dorothy looked at her companions, Toto, Button Bright, Shaggy Man, Polychrome. She didn't feel afraid, just curious. "What's Sip's waiting for us?" she asked. "A celebration," Taran said, "but also a reckoning. Ozma Sip's birthday is more than just cake and guests. It is the time when the magic of Oz refreshes itself through those who are new to the land. That means you." "Yes," Button Bright asked. "We set part of the celebration?" "You are central to it," Taran said. "Each of you has something Ozma must see, something you must offer. Not a gift you carry, but a truth you have lived." They were quiet, each taking that in. Polychrome descended and touched the ground lightly. "Then we must be close." "Just beyond this arch," Taran said, "the fields of Oz proper begin. The Emerald City is a day Sip's walk." Dorothy stepped forward. "Then we Citra ready." Taran stepped aside. "One last thing." They turned. He looked at each of them, eyes gleaming. When you reach Ozma, tell her this. The road remembered them well. Dorothy nodded. We will. They stepped through the arch, and with that, the mists of magic, memory, and fear fell away completely. The sky above grew clearer, the grass grew greener, the road shone like starlight. They were going home, not to Kansas, but to the place where wonder lived, where truth walked with kindness, and where even the most lost soul could find themselves again. Chapter 12. The Guardian of the Gates. The arch behind them faded like a dream the moment they passed through it. Not vanished, just gone in the way memories slip softly into the back of the mind, still there, but no longer needed to guide the steps forward. What lay ahead was unmistakable. The land of Oz. It looked almost exactly as Dorothy remembered it. Rolling green hills, golden meadows bursting with wildflowers, fruit trees heavy with jewels of color, and a sky so perfectly blue it could make Kansas jealous. The air had a different weight here, lighter, sweeter, full of the scent of peppermint and peach blossoms. And far in the distance, rising like a crown above the hills, stood the Emerald City. Its towers gleamed even in the afternoon light, each spire catching the sun and scattering it in sparkles across the countryside. The green domes shimmered like sea glass, and the tallest tower wore a flag of silk, so fine it danced with no wind at all. Dorothy clutched her chest. There it is. I really didn't believe we fit make it this time. You always say that, Shaggy Man said gently, and you always do. Tuto barked with excitement, circling Dorothy's feet like a child who'd just seen home from a train window. Button Bright shielded his eyes. It looks bigger than I imagined. Not bigger, Polychrome said softly, her voice tinged with awe, just brighter. They followed the silver road, now smooth and solid again, through fields of tall clover and past gentle streams where butterflies skimmed the water like boats. It wasn't long before they saw a figure ahead. A tall man in a green coat, a grand hat, and a long brass telescope stood beside a shining gate carved from emerald and gold. He was polishing the telescope with an oversized handkerchief and humming to himself. As they approached, he turned, squinting slightly. "Dorothy Gale!" he exclaimed. "By all the stars in the Gillikin sky!" Dorothy grinned. "Hello, Guardian." The man laughed and swept off his hat in a theatrical bow. "It's so good to see you again. My word, you Sep's grown. A little, maybe not in height, but certainly in reputation." It's good to see you too," she said. "We had a long road." "I can see that," he said, eyeing their mismatched clothes and travel dust. "And I don't mean just on your boots. There's something changed about you. Braver, maybe, or wiser." "I don't feel very wise," said Button Bright. "That's how you know you're getting there," said the Guardian, smiling. Polychrome floated forward. "Is the city ready for visitors?" The Guardian nodded. "More than ready. Ozma has been preparing for weeks. She sips expecting many guests, but none quite like you." Dorothy stepped closer. "She knows we coming." "She hoped you would," he said. He said, "They will call. When the road is ready, they'll find it. And if they find it, then let them through my gates, with every honor I possess." He turned and waved his hand. The great emerald gates swung open silently on invisible hinges. Beyond them lay the city streets, paved in shining green stone. Flowering vines lined the buildings. Music drifted faintly on the breeze. Violins and flutes, harps and laughter. Citizens in fine clothes bustled about, preparing for celebration. "Welcome," said the Guardian softly, stepping aside, "to the Emerald City of Oz." They stood in the threshold for a moment, quiet. Dorothy felt something inside her, a pull, a warmth, a knowing. She was not just visiting, she belonged here, not always maybe, and not forever, but here, now, she was home. "Come on," she said, smiling at her friends, "let's go see Ozma." And together, they walked through the gates. The city welcomed them with open arms. Chapter 13. Into the Emerald City. The moment they stepped through the great emerald gates, the world seemed to exhale in delight. The Emerald City sparkled on all sides, not just from the green jewels set into its walls, but from the life that thrived within them. Flowers bloomed in windowsills, shaped like stars. Singing birds with silvery feathers perched on floating lampposts. The streets were swept so clean you could see your reflection in the bricks. Every building was unique. domes of spun glass, arches carved like vines, towers that shimmered like frozen waterfalls. Yet everything shared the same soft green hue, the signature of Ozma's capital. And everywhere, people were smiling. Not the forced, polite smiles of nervous cities, but the warm, genuine kind. Everyone greeted them with a wave or a bow. Children in emerald tunics ran beside their wagonless carriages, tossing paper butterflies into the air. "It's even more beautiful than I remembered," Dorothy whispered. "And cleaner," Shaggy added, glancing at his coat. Polychrome twirled in mid-air, casting prisms of color in all directions. "This city is built on joy." Button Bright walked slowly, spinning in place. "I feel like I stem inside a dream." "You are," Dorothy said softly, "but it sits real." They were met by a pair of green-clad attendants who bowed so low their hats nearly fell off. "Honored guests," said the taller one, "Queen Ozma has prepared rooms for you in the Palace of Glowing Gardens. Follow us, please." Without hesitation, the travelers followed. The palace stood at the center of the city, a towering structure with walls of translucent emerald glowing from within. It looked like a castle carved from springtime. They passed under an archway of flowering crystal vines and into a marble courtyard full of music and laughter. Tinkling fountains poured rainbow-colored water. Courtiers and guests in fine silks and floating capes were preparing for what could only be described as a festival fit for a fairy queen. Inside the palace, hallways of polished stone led to lush rooms, each one prepared for their comfort. Dorothy's chamber was filled with sunflowers and soft cushions and smelled faintly of home, apple pie, and fresh linens. She set Toto down on a green velvet rug, and he immediately began snuffling every corner in excitement. There was even a small portrait of Aunt Sem and Uncle Henry on the table, framed in silver leaf. Dorothy smiled. Ozma thinks of everything. Before long, a soft chime rang through the halls, and a voice, musical, soft but commanding, called out, "Please welcome the Queen Seb's honored guests to the throne hall." Dorothy Set's heart skipped. She Set's really here. Together, the 5 travelers were led down a grand corridor lined with mirrors that showed not their reflections, but images of their journey: the mist, the rainbow, the chasm, the Scoodlers, the fog. As they entered the throne room, sunlight filtered through high emerald windows, casting beams of green and gold. At the far end sat Ozma, Queen of Oz, on a throne of intertwined crystal branches. She looked almost unchanged from when Dorothy had last seen her, young, serene, wise beyond years, with a crown of silver leaves and a gown like a flowing waterfall. Dorothy ran forward, respectfully, but with all her heart. Ozma rose and opened her arms. "Dorothy Gale." Dorothy threw her arms around her friend. "Ozma, I missed you so much." "And are you?" Ozma said, smiling gently. "Every year on my birthday, I wish for you to find your way back." Dorothy stepped aside, and Ozma turned to the others. "Button Bright," she said, "you Sib come a long way from confusion." He bowed awkwardly. "I still don't know much." "That Sip's how most of us begin," she said. To the Shaggy Man, she continued, "Your wisdom remains exactly where it belongs, hidden behind kindness." Shaggy grinned. "I try not to make a fuss." "And Polychrome," Ozma said, her tone becoming even more musical, "Daughter of the Rainbow, your colors are always welcome in my realm." Polychrome bowed in mid-air, "And your kingdom glows with light, even in the shadows." Then Ozma knelt beside Toto and gave him a scratch behind the ears. Still watching over her, Toto barked once, as if to say always. The courtiers began to applaud. A quiet ripple of magic swept through the room, and the sun above flared slightly, as if in approval. Ozma rose again. "Tomorrow we celebrate, not just my birthday, but your arrival." Dorothy felt tears prick her eyes. "I didn't bring you a gift." Ozma touched her hand. "You did. You brought your journey." And with that, the room bloomed with soft music, and servants appeared to guide them to a welcome feast. Honey cakes, sparkling lemonade, glowing fruit slices, and every manner of delightful food. There was laughter, there were stories, there were no worries, not tonight. The journey had ended. And something else, something greater, was just about to begin. Chapter 14. Preparations for the celebration. Morning in the Emerald City arrived like the first note of a song, light, warm and full of promise. Sunlight poured in through tall green windows, dappled by vines of blooming crystal roses. The air buzzed with excitement. Down every street, citizens were decorating balconies, hanging banners made of floating light, and painting the cobblestones with golden chalk. Music drifted from every corner, fiddles, flutes, harps, and the occasional cheerful trumpet. Ozmasip's birthday was just hours away. Dorothy sat by her window in the Palace of Glowing Gardens, watching it all unfold. She held a cup of mint tea in both hands. Toto curled at her feet. For the first time in days, there was no rush, no danger, just being. She smiled. It sits like the whole city sits holding its breath. A soft knock came at her door. Polychrome floated in, hair aglow with morning dew. Ozma invites us to the garden. Final touches are being made. She wants us to see. Dorothy rose at once. Let's go. The royal garden was more like a magical meadow, stretching across terraces with whispering willows, singing blossoms, and ponds filled with glimmering fish that leapt in rhythm with the music drifting through the air. Ozma stood at the center in a simple dress of green and silver, her crown removed, her hands gently adjusting a garland of starlight flowers. She turned with a smile. You came. Dorothy curtsied out of habit. You didn't need to invite us. We follow you anywhere. Today isn't set just about me, Ozma said. It sets about everyone who has ever walked the road to Oz and found a piece of themselves along the way. Polychrome tilted her head. You mean us? Ozma nodded. Exactly. Behind her, courtiers bustled to arrange gifts, chairs, and floating lanterns that would light themselves as the sun dipped low. Servants approached with trays of folded silk and emerald cords. I prepared something for each of you, Ozma said, as thanks for your journey and your friendship. First, she turned to Button Bright. You wandered far with no memory, no direction, and no fear. And now, you stand here with something better than answers, curiosity. She placed a circlet of soft gold around his head, enchanted to glow only when he asked questions from the heart. He grinned. This is the nicest thing anyone's ever given me. Then she turned to Shaggy Man. You carried the love magnet, but never misused it. You chose connection over command. You reminded us that love isn't something to take, it's something to invite. She fastened a gleaming emerald pin shaped like a heart and key to his coat. He tapped it and smiled. It'll go nicely with my patches. To Polychrome, she said. You fell from the sky but never looked down on the ground. Your light danced with ours and made it shine brighter. She handed Polychrome a flute made from wind itself, silent until played by joy. Polychrome bowed low in the air. I shall play it in the skies. Finally, Ozma turned to Dorothy. There are no gifts I can give you greater than what you already hold. Loyalty, courage, kindness. But I can give you a reminder of who you are to Oz. She placed a green enameled brooch on Dorothy's dress. In the center was a simple design, a small farmhouse under a twinkling star. Your heart makes both Kansas and Oz feel like home, Ozma said. You taught us that magic is not a place but a choice. Dorothy felt her throat catch. Thank you. And one more thing, Ozma said gently. Bring me your friend. Dorothy looked down at Toto, who sat proudly at her feet. Ozma knelt and whispered a single word to the little dog. Toto blinked and then spoke. I've always known what you were saying, he said in a small, clear voice, looking up at Dorothy. Now you can know what I've saying too. Dorothy gasped. Toto. He wagged his tail. I don't plan to talk all the time, just when it matters. Everyone laughed. Polychromes like bells, Button Brights like a hiccup, and Shaggy's like an old tune rediscovered. As the sun rose higher, the final preparations were made. Floating tables of enchanted cakes and candies, flowered chairs that adjusted to the height of the guest, and long green carpets that rolled themselves into place. Creatures from all corners of Oz began to arrive. Winged monkeys, quadlings in red silks, talking animals, and living trees who bowed slowly as they passed through the gates. Even Glinda the Good, radiant in shimmering pink, floated down in a bubble to embrace Ozma. It's going to be the grandest celebration Oz has ever seen, she said. But Ozma, watching Dorothy and her companions laugh together near a tree that grew teacups, smiled quietly to herself. No, she whispered, it already is. Chapter 15. Guests from Fairylands. The sun hung high above the Emerald City, casting golden light on towers of green glass and streets bursting with joy. The scent of honey cakes and sugar blossoms floated on the breeze, and the laughter of children mingled with the chiming of music boxes and bells. Ozma Sip's birthday had begun, but even amid the dancing, singing, and feasting, a low, eager buzz ran through the city, because everyone knew that today was no ordinary royal celebration. It was the one day each year when the barriers between realms softened and guests from fairylands beyond Oz were allowed to cross the veils and visit. The magical gates stood open, guarded not by soldiers, but by songbirds and starlight. And then they began to arrive. Santa Claus was the first. He came in a sleigh, pulled not by reindeer, but by silver-winged elk who left snowflakes in their wake. He stepped from the sleigh in his warm red coat, white beard shining, eyes crinkling with warmth. Dorothy gasped. Santa Claus. Ozma welcomed him with a smile and a bow. "You are always welcome, old friend." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Santa said, handing out small gifts to every child within arm's reach, even Button Bright, who received a compass that always pointed toward good ideas, though it wobbled slightly near Shaggy. Queen Zixi of Ix came next. Tall and regal, wrapped in a flowing robe that shimmered like moonlight, she descended a staircase made of mist. A mischievous gleam sparkled in her eye. "I bring riddles and ribbon dancers," she announced, snapping her fingers. Behind her, a troupe of shimmering performers began to twirl. Polychrome clapped in delight. She weaves her own magic. Then came the fairy queen Lulea, riding a butterfly the size of a pony. She spoke in a voice like running water and wore a crown made of dew. At her touch, flowers bloomed instantly. She kissed Ozma's hand, then turned and smiled at Dorothy. "You carry magic within you," she said gently. "Not borrowed, but earned." Dorothy blushed. "Thank you, Masip." A small dragon, no bigger than a goat, waddled in next, golden-scaled and puffing gentle smoke rings. He was accompanied by the Gnome King's ambassador, who looked suspicious but intrigued. "Official courtesy," the ambassador grumbled. "No tricks today, only treaties." Ozma accepted with grace. "Then today we feast in peace." And on they came. The King of the Ryles, his cloak of leaves rustling softly. The Princess of the Cloud Dwellers, whose voice left frost patterns on glass. The Mayor of the Munchkin Moon, who carried a briefcase full of fireworks. Even the clockwork philosopher from the Time Kingdom, who only spoke in riddles that ran backward. Dorothy stood in awe. She had seen many strange things since first stepping into Oz, but this was different. It was as if all the stories she'd ever heard had walked out of their books and into one place. "Is it always like this?" she asked Ozma. Ozma stood beside her, glowing in a gown of stardust thread. "Once a year. On my birthday, I open the door not just to my people, but to possibility. These are allies, friends, legends. It's like every world touched hands today," said Dorothy. "That sep's exactly the point," Ozma said. Later that afternoon, a parade wound through the city. It wasn't like any parade Dorothy had seen before. There were floating boats made of song, dancers on clouds, trees that walked and bowed, animals who recited poetry, and even a pie that sang opera when sliced. Toto rode on a cushion of green silk and barked happily at everything, particularly at a floating cheese wheel. Button Bright sat on the shoulders of a unicorn made of mist. Shaggy Man danced with a laughing fox queen in a coat of flame-colored velvet. Polychrome spun rainbows into the sky, each arc greeted with cheers from the crowd. And Dorothy marched beside Ozma, hand in hand, not as a guest, not even as a visitor, but as someone belonging. As the sun began to lower, casting golden rays through the tallest towers, Ozma led her guests into the central garden. Lanterns of glowing fruit lit themselves. Tables filled with impossible delicacies appeared from puffs of sparkles. But before the feast began, Ozma stepped onto a platform shaped like a blooming lily and raised her arms. "Today," she said, "we do more than celebrate. We remember that every step we take on the road of wonder is guided by love, by courage, and by choice." She turned her gaze on Dorothy, Shaggy, Polychrome, Button Bright, and smiled. "Let us remember what the road brought us this year." The guests raised their glasses, the lanterns shimmered, and high above, The sky turned a deep, enchanted green, stars beginning to wink into view, each one a story waiting to be told. Chapter 16. The Grand Birthday Ball. As twilight draped the Emerald City in a cloak of soft purple and gold, the grand halls of the Palace of Glowing Gardens began to shimmer with life. The music started low and gentle, a harp's tender pluck, the soft hum of flutes weaving through the air, before swelling into a joyous symphony that filled every corner and corridor. Guests in dazzling gowns and sharp tuxedos twirled beneath crystal chandeliers that sparkled like captured stars. Dorothy stood near the entrance of the ballroom, Toto nestled in her arms. She felt the warmth of the evening settle in her chest like a gentle fire. Around her, familiar faces, old friends and new gathered, smiles bright and eyes full of wonder. Shaggy Man approached, adjusting his emerald pin. "Care to dance, Miss Dorothy?" She laughed softly, offering her hand. "I thought you stid never ask." They moved into the swirl of dancers, their feet light and laughter easy. Button Bright found himself twirling with a crowd of laughing children, their joy infectious and bright as sunlight. Polychrome floated above, weaving sparkling trails of color that painted rainbows across the walls and ceiling. Ozma watched from her throne-like dais, radiant in a gown woven from moonlight and dreams. When the music softened, she rose and stepped gracefully into the dance, drawing Dorothy into a circle of close friends. "Tonight," Ozma said softly, "we celebrate not just another year, but the bonds that make our world whole, the friendships forged on the road, on journeys both near and far." Dorothy felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Polychrome smiling. "You sip changed since the journey began," she said, "not just in heart, but in light." "I think Oz has changed too," Dorothy replied, "because of us and everyone like us." As the ball continued, stories were shared beneath the chandeliers, tales of bravery, of kindness, of laughter in the face of fear. Button Bright recounted their narrow escape from the Scoodlers with wide eyes and animated hands, causing bursts of laughter. Shaggy Man told of the power of the love magnet and how it had softened even the hardest hearts in Foxville. Polychrome sang a haunting melody on her wind flute, the notes weaving through the crowd like a gentle breeze, calming and uplifting all who heard. And when the clock chimed midnight, Ozma raised her glass. "To the road that brought us here," she toasted, "to the friends we have found along the way, and to the magic yet to come." The guests echoed her toast, their voices ringing clear. Dorothy looked around, her heart full. The road had been long and strange, but it had brought her home, again. The music swelled once more, hands were clasped, feet moved faster, and the night sparkled with laughter and light. Toto barked happily, chasing after a flickering firefly. The Grand Birthday Ball was a celebration of life, love, and the endless journey of friendship. And as the stars glittered overhead, Dorothy knew that no matter where the road led next, she would never walk it alone. Chapter 17. Farewells and Wishes. The morning after the Grand Birthday Ball was soft and golden, as if the sun itself was reluctant to rise and bring the festivities to an end. The streets of the Emerald City hummed quietly with the gentle footsteps of those beginning their journeys home, or onward to new adventures. The laughter and music had faded into warm memories, leaving behind a peaceful calm. Dorothy stood on a balcony, overlooking the bustling square. Toto curled at her feet, his eyes half closed but alert. Around her, friends and visitors exchanged embraces, shared last words, and promised to meet again. Button Bright tugged at her sleeve, eyes shining. "I don't want to leave." Dorothy knelt to meet him. "I know, me neither, but the road is always waiting." Shaggy Man smiled from nearby, adjusting his emerald heart pin. Every goodbye carries a promise of return or of new beginnings. Polychrome floated gently beside Dorothy, her rainbow dress catching the morning light like a prism. The sky always holds space for those who wander. Ozma approached, serene and radiant as ever, a delicate bouquet of starlight flowers in her hand. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her gaze warm. "You have brought new magic to Oz." "And you have given us a home," Dorothy replied. Ozma smiled and placed a hand on Dorothy Sip's shoulder. "Whenever you wish to return, the road will be ready." A hush fell as Ozma turned to Button Bright, Shaggy, and Polychrome, offering each a token of remembrance, a glowing crystal, a ribbon of light, a song that lingered like the wind. The travelers exchanged hugs and promises. "I'll miss this place," Button Bright said quietly. "So will I," said Polychrome, "but every end is also a beginning." Shaggy looked at Dorothy and grinned, ready for the journey home. Dorothy nodded, "As ready as I still ever be." The four friends gathered in the palace courtyard, where a shimmering portal shimmered, a swirling gateway framed in emerald and gold. Ozma stepped forward and touched the portal gently. "This will take you home. But remember, the magic of Oz lives wherever kindness and courage walk with you." Dorothy took a deep breath and stepped forward, Toto trotting beside her. Button Bright followed, still holding his glowing crystal. Shaggy Man and Polychrome brought up the rear, their faces bright with hope. With a final wave to Ozma and the city they'd come to love, they stepped through the portal. The world shifted softly, the air changed, the light softened. Suddenly, Dorothy found herself standing back on the dusty Kansas road near her home. Toto barked happily and wagged his tail. Button Bright blinked, rubbing his eyes. "We made it." Dorothy smiled, looking around at the familiar fields and the warm farmhouse in the distance. I think I'm glad we took the road," she said. Shaggy laughed. "There's Sips, no other road worth taking." And as the sun set over the Kansas plains, Dorothy, Button Bright, Shaggy, and Toto, along with the memories of a magical journey, looked forward to whatever adventures lay ahead. Chapter 18: The Journey Home. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the Kansas countryside. Dorothy stood at the edge of the wheat fields, the familiar stretch of golden stalks waving gently in the evening breeze. Toto sat loyally by her side, ears perked and eyes alert. Button Bright, still carrying the small glowing circlet Ozma had given him, looked around with wide eyes. "It feels smaller than I imagined." Shaggy Man leaned against a fence post, his emerald heart pin catching the last rays of sunlight. "Home often does, after you've seen a little magic." Dorothy smiled softly. "I never thought I miss Oz this much, but I'm glad to be back." The road they had traveled, the twisting, shimmering silver path, was gone now, vanished like a dream fading at dawn. But the lessons, the friendships, and the courage they had found along it remained strong in their hearts. A gentle wind rustled through the trees, carrying a faint echo of laughter and music, reminders that magic could live anywhere, so long as they believed. "Do you think we'll ever see each other again?" Button Bright asked, his voice hopeful. Dorothy took his hand. "I hope so. The road to Oz may be gone for now, but the road between friends is never lost." Shaggy smiled, tipping his hat. "And if ever the road calls again, I'll be ready." Toto barked, as if agreeing. As twilight deepened, Dorothy turned toward the farmhouse where Aunt Em and Uncle Henry would be waiting, unaware of the incredible journey their niece had taken. But Dorothy carried it all inside her, the magic, the friendship, the wonder, and she knew that no matter where life's road might lead next, she would never truly be lost. For the road home is not just a place, it is a feeling. Thanks for spending this quiet time with me here at Sweet Dreams Storytelling. I hope you're feeling relaxed, peaceful, and ready for a restful sleep. As we say goodnight, let the calm background music guide you gently into dreamland. Before you go, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. And until next time, rest well.